So, are we ready to set forth and mine asteroids and do other bold things out there? Well, people are ready for the excitement. Witness how this whole news about Planetary Resources Company was greeted on the Jon Stewart show, when Stewart expressed boredom with the presidential race, but then said, "This, mining asteroids? Are you freaking kidding me? This is the way news from 2012 was supposed to be." Well, his New York audience went bat crazy. There's a lot of potential enthusiasm for this. Planetary resources is only the commercial side of a decision that was also made by NASA at the behest of President Obama to shift our attention from the sterile and useless moon to asteroidal exploration, which in addition to everything else would give us the techniques for going to Mars. Well, all right. So what are the ramifications? What's entailed in this process? Well, you have vast potential mineral wealth, volatiles that you can get by putting bags around and heating up carbonaceous chondrites, vast amounts of valuable metals from the more metallic asteroids. One kilometer asteroid that's made of the right materials might supply 10 years worldwide steel production, 100 years gold and silver production, 1,000 years platinum group elements. That's a lot of money. Now, there are a lot of issues that you have to get past, though, in order to make this work. For instance, how to access and characterize these objects. Well, that's underway. I talked about how with the new optical technologies and communications technologies and computational, and by making use of distributed computing among perhaps a million personal computers, planetary resources may be able to do this first stage of characterizing the smaller objects very cheaply. Then comes the issue of how to then get them, grab them, move them, even though they have very small delta V's from Earth, some of them, how to get them settled in to perhaps some of the Lagrange points, which is far enough away from Earth so they don't endanger us, but near enough so that the resources are reliably within easy reach. Well, this is all very, very important stuff. And it turns out that moving a small asteroid, well, there are some theoretical techniques to do that. For instance, using solar sail tugs, where you don't have to actually supply the fuel to rocket them. You hover a solar sail with a mass at the end at just the right angle near an asteroid, a small asteroid, so that it is pulling away but held back by the asteroid's gravitational field. The net effect is to move the asteroid without actually touching it. In theory, it should work. It's time for us to do the experiment. Can you believe that in the last 60 years, NASA has never launched a solar sail test mission? Unbelievable. Well, once you can move them back, then you have legal and safety concerns. It turns out that the space treaty, which encompasses who owns what in space and how people are supposed to behave, nations are supposed to behave in space, is very vague about commercial exploitation. Some revisions are going to have to be made. One could envision several regimes in which, for instance, investors are allowed to make, say, 10 times their return on investment back, completely tax-free. But then the next regime, from 10 to 100 times, they have to pay some tax that is divided among nations or among international agencies. And then beyond that, once they're starting to become filthy rich, perhaps antitrust laws ought to come into play. if planetary resources get so vastly rich that they start becoming a monopoly of all Earth's wealth, obviously they need to be broken up. I hope that happens. You then have safety concerns. Asteroids near the Earth? People are going to be concerned about that. So we're going to have to be in space, active, doing things enough so that there's law out there, so that there are enough people doing enough things out there so that we'll notice if somebody's doing a bad thing with these asteroids. The solution is not to do nothing or to do little. The solution is to do a lot, but with open eyes. Then comes the question of mining and smelting and refining these materials. Well, there are a lot of theoretical ways to do this. Bagging and evaporating carbonaceous chondrites for the volatiles, using solar methods to melt or carve into medium-sized asteroids, or taking medium-small asteroids and bringing them actually into a disassembly bay where they can be disassembled or taken apart. There are a lot of aspects to this. I can't claim to be an expert in this, not anymore. But I plan on learning a lot more about it. It's very exciting. And writing about it. Gregory Benford and I, back in the mid-'80s, published Heart of the Comet, which was about a scientific and commercial expedition of 100 astronauts to Halley's Comet in 2063, landing on it with the intent of herding this large object into a gentle orbit around the moon so it could be disassembled and make the whole planet rich. Remember, what we're talking about here is the possibility of providing for our economy all the things that we currently mine for, the metals and things, tearing into Mother Earth and using up a lot of carbon-rich fuels at the process, spewing it into the air. In fact, there are two ways to divide the wealth here. The volatiles, the water, would all be used in space. Most of the steel would also be used in space. Not a lot of point in dropping that down into the Earth. The platinum group elements, the gold, probably will be brought to Earth using breaking shells that we would make out of asteroid material, out of regolith in orbit. Well, then you have the question of the economics. Well, we all know what happens when you get a new supply of something. At first, you make a lot of money at the old price. Then the price goes down. So, the guys at Planetary Resources are going to have to assume that once they start bringing home a lot of asteroidal platinum and gold, the prices for these materials will plummet. Be warned, you gold bubble guys. Is that a bad thing? Of course not. We have far better uses for gold than to stare at it and rub our hands chortling over its price. There are so many better things to do with it. And that's what these guys want to do. They want to do those things. Eventually, what we want is to be able to use these materials in orbit to make bold things like habitats and radiation shielding for expeditions to the planets, and possibly great big collectors of solar energy that can then be beamed to Earth. So we no longer have to either dig into the Earth or suck it dry. So there's a lot of aspects to this. And I'm sure the guys over at Planetary Resources have been discussing them all. What it comes right down to is this. Capitalism is not the enemy in our current culture war and our political problems. Liberals have to get used to that notion that the first liberal, Adam Smith, wasn't about tyranny and monopoly. He was about competition, fair and open competition, which provides the positive sum game that lifts all boats and has made us all rich. Most of us, even the poor, much richer than kings were in the past. No, open market enterprise, entrepreneurialism, capitalism are victims of culture war and monopoly. And what these guys are after is what they were after when they innovated with Google and PayPal. To get rich while making everybody rich in a positive some way. And to create the flood of new things that can make us wealthy enough so that not just the best educated Westerners feel guilt-ridden about what we've done to the earth, but so that all children grow up so pampered and educated that they're all guilt-ridden about the earth and all become eager to make a better world. It's this lifting of all boats, avoiding monopolies, but instead encouraging the groundswell of resources and the greatest resource of all, the can-do spirit, that this is fundamentally about. And that's one of the reasons, other than the fact that I'm a sci-fi author and I'm jumping up and down with excitement from that aspect, that's one of the biggest reasons. Trying to make a better world. That's one of the biggest reasons why I'm very excited about this.